In this video I want to have a look at the city of Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. The capital of the province, located right at the southern tip of Vancouver Island. And I had the opportunity to visit Victoria recently, and I've included some of the photos I took there in this video. So let's have a look at some of the historical narrative surrounding Victoria. On the Wikipedia write-up, we have the current population sitting around 91,000, the Greater Victoria area having almost 400,000. Densely populated. British settlement began in 1843, we're told. Retains a number of its historic buildings, of course. We'll have a look at those. Listing off a few of those, we have a Chinatown, a government building or a parliament building, and we also, if we scroll down, we get to the historical demographic on population, and I always find it important to include these numbers as we look through the buildings that went up in a specific time frame. So look here, we're looking at not much going on. 1871, 3000, and a couple jumps for every decade there. Pretty significant jump here, but still by 1911, let's say by 1921, they're looking at 38,000 people, and most of the buildings you're going to see in this video are from this time period, some even before 1871. So keep in mind now we're looking at a city of less than 40,000 people, and let's look at some of those buildings. Let's start out with a picture from 1865. Right away you get that sense of not so much Wild West, but the buildings having that brick old world style architecture, arches, things like that. 1865, so this is what, 3,000 people-ish according to the data. 1868, they're calling this St. Andrew's Presbyterian. This no longer in existence. Why and how would you build on an island on the west coast of Canada something like this at that period of time? This, the interior having the pipe organ, and the same building a little further on down the line, having the spires chopped off and turned into a newspaper establishment. The first newspaper in the province, which is still in existence today. Okay, now we have a few more churches. This one still stands, St. Andrew's, 1890, this picture from same church from a different angle. 1890, right? 1891, this picture from showing us a little snapshot of part of the town. Again, you are seeing something that appears to be very, very well built out for this period of time. A lot of ships in the harbor, you know, spires here. This one, a really nice street scene. I like this one. 1903, we're told. Look at how pristine the curb work is here. We have the trolley cars in full effect here, well built into the roads, tracks. Alright. A little bit more from that time. This one, a bird's eye view, aerial view, 1927, we're told, looking down here on the inner harbor. Also looking very well built out for the time, but giving us an idea of how established everything is here. You see all the streets. A little bit later on, but we have the streetcars still in use. And again, the streetcar looking more like in a less densely populated neighborhood, but nevertheless still using the streetcars or the rail cars. And we'll go through some pictures here. We have the post office, looking familiar. We have a couple Christchurch cathedrals. Here's the first one. This one no longer in existence. This is a picture of the armory. Still stands. I visited this, took a few pictures, didn't include them, but you get the sense here, that real castle feel. Here's the back end of the armory. Heavy military presence in the area. I don't know, heavy might not be the right word, but there certainly is a naval military presence here. And they had a theater, a royal theater. This is obviously a brick building, red brick building. You get a sense of the patterning on the brick here. And then some of the detailing on the front here. This built in 1912. And here's some of the interior. So you're getting a bit of the statue work and a bit of the moldings. 1884, this one from Kerry Castle. Here a snapshot of Chinatown, 1906. Again, have a look at how well built up the street is. The curb work here on the street. This whole system fully intact. And this at a fairly early period of time. Again, on a remote island on the west coast of Canada. Alright, here we have the second Christchurch Cathedral. Not a great picture, it's a postcard. This actually a third Christchurch Cathedral, so this narrative gets confusing. 1893, the year of this one. Here's the interior of the Christchurch Cathedral we saw from the postcard previous. Pretty spectacular looking. I really wonder why you would go to all the trouble to build something like this in such a relatively remote location as far as the world is concerned. This is the ceiling. City Hall still intact. Now this says here Dunsmuir Castle is referred to as Craigdarroch Castle. Sits on the hill overlooking that downtown area we saw in the aerial view. Supposedly built in the late 1890s. This looking like a very old photograph, and we've got looking like a very old building as well in this photograph. 1895, there you go, so little earlier than that, early 1890s, this one built. And I visited this one. Here's some visuals of what it looks like today, and you get a real sense of the size of the stonework or whatever it might be. You got granite columns as well. Remember 1800s on an island. This is pre-power tools, remember. $1912. Okay, now we get to the Empress Hotel. A little bit confusing narrative here as well. This is front and center on what we call the inner harbor of Victoria. Here's the inner harbor. Massive stonework here on the inner harbor. I don't really have a date for when this was constructed, this inner harbor. The hotel itself supposedly constructed in the early 1900s by the Canadian Pacific Railway company at the time, building hotels all across Canada. I can think of the Banff Hotel. I can think of Chateau Frontenac, the Laurier Hotel in Ottawa, all of these supposedly shooting up right around the same period of time across the country. And here's one I took. A bit of a panorama, not a great photograph, but you can see the extension here on the left. And this one going back again to about 100 years. And there you have it again. There's the ivy crawling all up it. Here's the inner harbor. There is the legislature building or parliament building. You'll see more of that. Let's take a quick look at the inner harbor. You see the stonework here. All these stones are just massive. And there's a shot I took of the stonework we just looked at. And maybe it's hard to tell here, but this stone is 3 to 4 feet long, probably about 16, 18 inches high. So massive stoneworks. Another castle, yes, another castle on an island on the west coast of Canada in the early 1900s or late 1800s. This one built supposedly early 1900s. This photo from 1920, supposedly this Hatley Castle built in 1905-06, somewhere in there. So we're having to expect or believe that this was about a 14-year-old building at this point in time. Here we see it as it looks today. And I wanted to include this little statue from Hatley Castle Manor, which is now part of Royal Roads University in Victoria. Interesting statue, kind of lifelike looking. Jubilee Hospital, old world building. Interesting there, the slope and the window size on the basement level. Again, you see this. I took this picture. This is just in behind the Parliament building. This kind of jumped out at me. I thought that was an odd size for an opening. Makes me think that there's more going on below. And here we have the Independent Order of Odd Fellows tied in with the Masons. This is the interior of their location. A heavy Masonic influence in Victoria, a heavy government influence, a heavy British monarchy influence in Victoria. So, ticking all the boxes of the colonial cover-up, if you will. Here, the Parliament building. There's the harbour you've seen. Parliament building, modern day. And a couple I took, just of some of the statues that you find as you walk around the Parliament building. Get a sense for what was going on with the architecture. This being built very late 1800s, 1898, I believe. But of course, no construction photos. Old library, having that same similar texture. An old Methodist church. So my question is, you walk through a town like Victoria and you have all this architecture, but you don't really have any recognition for the ones who actually physically built these buildings. You don't have much of a sense of history. Anybody claiming that their grandparents worked on these or great-grandparents worked on these, or any sort of pride in the craftsmanship. It just seems to be like a black hole in history. We hear about the people who fund it, we hear about the professionals along the way that made a name for themselves, but we don't ever really hear about the details of the buildings. This normal school, they're calling it, part of modern-day Camosun College. Same place here, and you get a sense again for the age. Built apparently in 1915, has a feel that it's quite a bit older. An old police barracks here, but again the brickwork, the castle-style brickwork, fully intact. So I guess if the historical narrative is legit, who was building these? Who were the people? But you know that I definitely doubt the historical narrative, and I'm skeptical, and I believe we're not being told the full story. This is another church. This one still stands downtown Victoria. Here's an old hospital. Then you get the columns in the upper deck. A bit of brickwork down here. Very regal feeling city, especially for the relative age, the youth of the town when you compare compare it to more of the European style cities, even the cities on the east coast of Canada. Another street scene for you. This would be the residence of the Lieutenant Governor, so it's a bit of a suspicious story, hard to trust anything I could find on it. Apparently burnt down and has been rebuilt. And it's now somewhere where you can take an evening stroll through the grounds of the building, or of the property. Another street scene here. There's the rail cars again. You've got this going on here. This one's stretching back a little further in time. Elephants, interesting. Horse and buggy era again. This building in front here is something you would expect from this time period, 1884. Just to get the materials milled up and sent to the area for this one would be a decent achievement, two-story building. But then you got buildings like this behind it, which is brick, circular windows. Back here you have again that little turret or tower and the brick chimneys. So this style going back quite a ways. Another old one. Impressive. The brickwork is impressive. A lot of this still stands. If you walk through Chinatown or a lot of the downtown area, you'll find a lot of the brickwork still intact. This one, apparently 1858. These are interesting. This style here, looking like larger brick or blockwork, and then you get up to more of the red brickwork. But I think what we're seeing here is some sort of concrete veneer made to look like stone. It's hard to tell sometimes which is which. But so again, this is quite early in the historical narrative for that to be going on. This is a bathhouse. Another street scene. Again, you can see the rail lines looking like they've been there for a good while. And then they're not supposed to. The historical narrative on these is very hazy as far as when it really came into popularity to be used widespread across the realm. I've done a video on that. Check that out. Trolleys, trams. And then you also have buildings 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 story building. Quite early on in time frame. Alright, we get to the end, and I wanted to highlight this. This is a picture I took. Interesting look here at first glance. It's maybe some sort of odd architectural feature. Let me show you what building this is on. Alright, so as we zoom in to the inner harbor, I've shown you the inner harbor here. This is the Empress Hotel. This would be the government building here. So the one I'm showing you now is the Glen Shiel Housing Society. It does have this picture where you can see a little bit of that feature in the background. So let me show you a few of the pictures I took. We're going to zoom in a little closer on these little features. And what it looks like to me is we're looking at some sort of bulging and melting of the brick. This looking very melted. And strange too, because it's not a uniform melting. It seems to sort of be popping, almost like popcorn, how some kernels pop and some don't. Here you have a bit of a cluster sort of starting to come out and change form and shape. This one pretty telling, giving you an idea of what might be going on there. This one's sort of still in the shape that it was built in, but starting to sort of bulge and slide out. So I don't know. I wanted to add this in at the end here, something for you to think about as we explore all sorts of historical narratives and try to poke holes in them. So that's the city of Victoria. More than meets the eye, I would say. Thank you for watching, and if you like my videos, please like, share, subscribe.